Hello all, welcome to yet another episode of True Wavy Stories. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. Today's subject is one that fans have been waiting for. The Sister Wives Tell-All episodes have finally been released, and the drama, particularly involving Kody Brown, has left viewers speechless. Following a brief mid-season hiatus that gave the show time to respond to the tragic death of Garrison Brown, Season 19 ended on an emotional note. As is tradition, the season concluded with a tell-all, this time hosted by Suki Krishnan. Typically, the Brown family members, Robin, Christine, Janelle, Meri and Kody, would all come out together to review the season. With recent breakups, though, Meri, Janelle and Christine appeared separately to give their individual experiences and insights. The premiere of the Tell-All occurred on May 25th. Before airing, TLC let viewers know that the family had asked that Garrison's death not be spoken about at the reunion to respect their mourning process. Nevertheless, the episode was full of heated and dramatic moments, most of them revolving around Kody. Kody's actions at the tell-all did not do much to enhance his public standing. He lost his cool several times during the interview, particularly when confronted by host Suki. The viewers of the show are accustomed to seeing Kody act out, but ever since the collapse of his relationship with 3 of his 4 wives, his tantrums have become significantly more frequent and emotional. Kody visibly looked bitter and defensive, particularly when talking about his relationship with Robin. He even went as far as to say at times that he never loved any of his wives but Robin. He said he felt like he was constantly blamed for loving her, and he didn't like being criticized, even going so far as to say he felt like flipping people off because of frustration. In one of the clips that TLC dropped, Kody retaliated against Suki when she attempted to correct him on how he put Robin first. It was evident he's still wounded by the rejection from Meri, Christine and Janelle, and that he's using his relationship with Robin as an excuse to cover his tracks. During the tell-all, Kody provided several conflicting responses. He said he was attempting to have balanced relationships with all of his wives, but then also said he couldn't love them equally since every woman is different. When Suki brought this to his attention, Kody answered caustically and sarcastically, suggesting she should try it herself and see how it functions, an inappropriate and evasive response that left many viewers stunned. Meri also stood up to Kody in the interview. She criticized him for his double standards when it involved their religious separation. She remembered how often Kody would assert that his religious views kept him from divorcing a wife, but those same religious views did not inhibit him from releasing their marriage when convenient. It was a direct instance of his double standards and created a lasting impression among viewers. Kody ultimately confessed on the tell-all that he no longer abides by the religious teachings that previously defined the spiritual foundation of the Brown family. Consequently, he denied Meri the spiritual freedom she sought, which was generally included in a religious divorce. This revealed an ongoing pattern with Kody of double standards. He holds others accountable for adhering to the rules, yet frequently lets himself off the hook for doing likewise. Kody had a hard time being responsible for the failure of his marriage to Meri. They both had extremely different perceptions about what caused the end. Kody in the interview conceded that during the heat of passion, it's difficult to be held accountable for everything that you say. Yet, when Suki questioned his hurtful comments about never truly loving Meri, Janelle or Christine, he at least admitted that, at the time, he believed he was maintaining those relationships, though now he recognizes he wasn't. For Meri, the separation was rooted in abandonment. She believed the religion gave her grounds for a spiritual release based on being left behind. Kody did not agree with the label abandonment and instead referenced her participation in the notorious internet catfishing controversy. By his account, Meri threw him out afterward and he never went back. She considered his disappearance abandonment, but he considered the scandal the final straw. The The reality is probably somewhere in between. There is no question the catfishing incident created cracks of great depth in their relationship. Still, Cody had checked out emotionally years earlier. Although he wasn't interested in working on the relationship, he stayed married to Mary, leading her to get false hopes. When she asked for closure at last and wanted to move on, Cody declined and instead behaved in frustration and defensive behavior. But the scandal didn't end there. Cody attracted even more criticism for comments he had made about the difference between mothers and fathers and how they love their children. In a conversation that found its way into fan forums online, Cody said he admired the unconditional love mothers bestow on their children, whereas fathers, according to him, have to provide tough love. He also said that mothers listen, whereas fathers are too concerned with solving issues. This remark did not go down well with the public. It was viewed by many as a lame effort to excuse his own failure as a father. Fans took to social media to lash out at him. One Reddit user stated Cody copped out instead of learning how to love unconditionally. Another said, "Everything he says is just another excuse." Cody's transformation from faithful husband and father to the isolated patriarch of a fractured family has been agonizing to behold. What began as a cohesive home with Mary, Janelle, and Christine has fragmented, mostly because Cody refuses to assume responsibility and habitually becomes a victim instead of confronting the emotional harm he has inflicted. Cody Brown has also continued to make comments that indicate he views his failures as a father, not as personal failures, but as outcomes of forces outside of his control. His most recent comments have grave implications for his relationship with his children, most of whom have distanced themselves from him in recent years. From 2021 to 2023, Cody literally existed as a monogamist, with Robin following the breakdown of his marriages with Mary, Janelle, and Christine. As the family broke up, so did his bonds with many of his children. Instead of trying to reunite, Cody appeared to pull away even more. He apparently demanded apologies from his grown children, holding their disrespect of Robin accountable. When those didn't materialize, he shut down. Communication was scarce. Holidays such as Christmas were no longer celebrated together, and some of his children didn't even get birthday calls, while Robin's children still got his entire attention, presence, and love. His recent comments regarding parental love only further entrenched the emotional gap. By asserting that mothers are instinctively wired to love their children without condition and fathers must develop that love, Cody seemed to justify his emotional distance from his children. The message was unmistakable. He was attempting to rationalize his absence, presenting himself as a victim of gendered norms, instead of admitting to falling short of remaining emotionally connected. Such remarks did not fall on deaf ears. Not only do they create a painful image in his children's minds, but they also ratify archaic and damaging gender stereotypes as well. Several of his fans were quick to pick him up on this and remind him that scores of fathers provide the same care and nurturing as mothers. Rather than owning up, Cody had recourse to stereotypical notions of parenting to protect himself from backlash. The backlash from Sister Wives fans has been fierce and warranted. Fans feel Cody's effort to generalize and justify his actions has further tainted his already questionable reputation. Most fans contributed their own anecdotes regarding their own fathers, who were emotionally engaged and intensely loving, supporting Cody's claims as both unjustified and untrue. As season 19 concluded with the much-hyped tell-all specials, fans were finally treated to an insight into the emotional devastation that the breakdown of the family has caused. Everyone concerned, Mary, Christine, Janelle, Robin, and Cody, appeared separately this time, no longer having to sit in the same room. That in itself is a big indication of how things stand with their relationships. The reunion was hosted by presenter Suki Krishnan, who is respected for her tact and sincerity. She took each of the Brown family members through painful confrontations, individual introspection, and extremely emotional confessions. But what was missing was togetherness. In previous seasons, the whole group used to sit together and confront each other, but this time the emotional chasm proved too gaping. The program started with a subtle warning. The sad death of Garrison Brown would not be touched upon in respect for the family's wishes. Nevertheless, the atmosphere at the reunion was mournful, weighed down by unresolved heartache, tension, and remorse. And right in the middle was Cody, still holding on to rationales, still unable to own up to his part in the dissolution of a family that once boasted cohesion. As soon as Cody Brown walked onto the screen during the tell-all, it was apparent that he hadn't mellowed with time. If anything, he'd grown more obstinate. His attitude was terse, his voice clipped, and his frustration thinly veiled. The emotional volatility that lay underneath became apparent, particularly when he was asked about the profound changes in what used to be a big, plural home. When his host asked him to examine how his priorities and affections had shifted with the passage of time, the fissures started to appear. Defensively, Cody declared he was being inappropriately victimized for giving freely his love to his lone remaining wife, Robin. He presented himself as the sympathetic one, casting the criticism from others as a front against his honesty and emotional openness in the wake of his earlier wives' exits. The interview reached a very awkward moment in a discussion of emotional equality. The host pointed out an obvious contradiction in Cody's words. On the one hand, he asserted that he had attempted to love all his wives equally. On the other, he maintained that it was impossible to be truly equal because each woman was unique. Cody was confronted with the inconsistency, and he reacted with sarcasm, ridiculing the question instead of addressing it. The mood became strained, and the tension in the room was palpable. Later in the episode, another ex-wife of his told her own complaint. She remembered she had asked Cody once for a proper spiritual release, a gesture of closure based on their shared religious practices. But Cody declined, even though he had already maintained that their religion did not allow for such a division. His denial, she claimed, was another instance of him adjusting his faith to fit his own narrative. In refusing her closure, while at the same time rejecting the very religious construct under which they had both existed, he demonstrated an unequivocal double standard. When questioned whether or not he had ever loved the wives who had left him, Cody hesitated with a half-hearted response. He did state that when angry, he sometimes said things without being accountable. When he was younger, he felt he was holding on to all of his relationships, but now he saw he wasn't. The interview probed further into the breakdown of his relationship with his initial spiritual mate. She told him that her faith community had given her a spiritual release on the basis of abandonment. Cody winced at the term. He referenced a previous scandal, a notorious online catfishing affair, instead as the actual point of rupture. She had kicked him out of the house that time, he said, and he never went back. While he considered the deception to be the initiators of their estrangement, she held the impression that the emotional withdrawal that ensued was infinitely more painful. In reality, both points of view have merit. The catfishing ordeal did put a strain on their relationship, but the damage had already been done by then. Although Cody was still legally and spiritually bound to her, he mentally checked out, leaving her in suspended animation. His continued physical presence kept her hoping for better, but his mental withdrawal sent a conflicting message. Even as she clung to the sliver of hope left, she was greeted not with effort or love, but with religious duty masked in indifference. What was played out on screen was a multi-layered unwinding of years of accumulated resentments, spiritual hypocrisy, and emotional wounds that never had the chance to heal. The reconciliation, rather than bringing closure, revealed naked truths. Issues of favoritism, spiritual hypocrisy, and emotional abandonment were the topics of discussion. Each of them provided a highly personal frame, informed by personal experience, but rooted in a general sense of disillusion. Once united by the tenets of unity and belief, their accounts were now disparate, each voice an individual echo of a broken whole. As the interviews continued, Cody's position became more and more combative. What had seemed so concrete convictions started to change like sand, fixed when challenged, but adaptable when it was convenient to his story. The pain of the emotional destruction his choices had wrought was very real, and his efforts to rationalize them usually rang hollow. Instead of taking responsibility for the failure of several relationships, Cody framed himself as a victim, betrayed by the people he had not taken the time to care for. But this meeting wasn't merely about laying bare one man's shortcomings. It was a mirror for all of them, reflecting years of decisions, sacrifices, and heartache. The women who had stood with him on a common spiritual quest now addressed him in fresh certitude. Their voices, heavy as they were with grief, also bore the unobtrusive strength of those who had opted for healing rather than clinging. There were no fairy tale endings, no grand reconciliations or promises of reunion. Instead, what viewers witnessed was the emergence of individual voices reclaiming their narratives. Each ex-wife, in her own way, moved a step closer to self-definition, not as a reflection of Cody's story, but as the author of her own. The aftermath of this reunion will undoubtedly ripple through future conversations and perhaps future seasons. But one thing was made absolutely clear. The days of the Brown family's unchallenged solidarity are behind us. Taking its place is a new era, one based on self-respect, honesty, and the ability to leave when love turns to domination. In a surprise few could have imagined, the man once celebrated as the emotional anchor of this unorthodox family is now its most polarizing member. Cody's recent public contemplations on the emotional duties of fathers and mothers only amplified the outrage. Once hailed as the foundation of an experiment in non-traditional family life, he is now ostracized, not only by viewers, but by many of the adult offspring he assisted in raising. The scandal started when Cody posted what he called an honest but unpopular view, that mothers love unconditionally, but fathers must often show love in terms of toughness. This statement, which he made first to a fan and then was passed around elsewhere on social media, exposed more than tired thinking. It exposed his emotional distance. What he probably meant as a justification for his far-off fathering was perceived instead as a plea for absence and favoritism. The public reacted with quick repudiation, blaming him for perpetuating toxic gender stereotypes and employing those concepts to justify his shortcomings as a father. Many referenced their own fathers, men who had loved fiercely, appeared reliably, and disavowed the notion that fathering is somehow less nurturing in kind. Cody, who was the linchpin of a sprawling home, now feels very lost. As this very telling chapter comes to a close, all that's left is not a family dismantled, but people remade. The story has moved away from patriarchal dominance towards individual transformation, healing, and truth. Whatever happens next, it's obvious the book of the Brown family legacy is being rewritten, not by a man's vision, but by the strength of those who had the courage to walk away. Fathers, himself included, Cody contended, tend to be expected to display concern in more functional, aloof ways. He confessed to envying seemingly boundless, unqualified love that females bestow upon their children, stating that men are trained to be fixers, not comforters. Perhaps meant as a self-reflexive commentary or an apology for his parenting style, his remarks hit a chord. They were seen by many as not insight, but a move to rationalize years of emotional distance, most notably following his broken marriages. When Cody initially accepted plural marriage, his dream of a home founded on cooperation, respect, and shared delight seemed attainable. During the early years, he received his first 3 wives, all of whom brought depth and nuance to the household. The outcome was a big, energetic family with lots of children who had special needs, goals, and relationships with their father. For some time, Cody seemed to juggle it all with excitement, celebrating birthdays with glee, proud of milestones, and exuding an aura of family harmony that attracted viewers. But when a 4th wife entered the picture, the balance was upset. Subtly at the beginning, and increasingly more overtly, the dynamics of affection and attention tilted. What had been a web of fairly equal relationships began to tip in one direction. A creeping favoritism took hold, producing subtle cracks. The original wives, once the foundation of the family, began to feel marginalized. Their issues were undermined, their contributions disregarded, and their position in the family decision-making framework eroded. This insidious marginalization ultimately caught up with them. They broke away one by one, exhausted from years of emotional disregard and an increasing awareness that their voices no longer counted. Their exits did not just break marriage. They ripped emotional blanks in the extended family fabric. Kids raised within this alternative, but once intact home puzzled over the transitions. Their father, once a constant presence, became elusive. His absence unmistakable in forgotten birthdays and unequal gifts, in the silence where once there had been connection. And then came the controversial remark that fathers must show tough love while mothers are naturally nurturing. Far from bridging the emotional divide, the comment deepened it. It came across not as an observation, but as an excuse. Instead of taking responsibility for the pain inflicted by his emotional absenteeism, Cody appeared to write it off to biology, suggesting that his remoteness was unavoidable, not optional. This attempt at deflection was quickly called out. Audiences and critics alike called to mind the numerous instances of fathers who are highly engaged, who nurture, comfort, and show affection as instinctively as any mother. In attempting to rationalize his own shortcomings, Cody had inadvertently disqualified all the men who work each day to be emotionally present dads. The myth that men need to be emotionally detached in order to be good dads was strongly contradicted by fans and pundits alike. Many dads challenge this stereotype daily, modeling both discipline and nurturing without perceiving the two as incompatible. There were tales of grandfathers who resolutely assumed leading caregiving roles, single dads who brought up their children warmly and sensitively, and males who accepted emotional vulnerability that dominated social media spaces where supporters of the family show expressed their disgruntlement. These counter-narratives contradicted directly the patriarch's recent words, emphasizing the emotional remove that had already dissolved his relationships with his children. His words seemed to validate what many of his children had always suspected, that his aloofness was not incidental but deeply ingrained in his individual beliefs. To some, it felt like one more nail in a coffin, securing years of emotional abandonment and failed contact. As a counterpoint, the wife who stood by his side went on record to defend him. She provided a window into his desperate desire to be understood and the staggering pressure he had borne in attempting to keep family life stable, particularly under the spotlight of public opinion. Although her aim was to temper the criticism and put things into perspective, her statement did nothing to stem the increasing backlash. What offended so many about the comments was their timing. They came at a time when there was still a chance to restore trust, to repair broken relationships, and traverse rickety bridges toward healing. Instead, the comments were a rebuff, a refusal to accept or own up to causing the hurt of his emotional absence.